Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Together We Write, Summer Edition. My name is Chris Perzicki. I'm Assistant Professor of English and Humanities here at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. And the purpose for this stream is to sort of provide an informal way of demonstrating the writing process, to put it simply. And now that would be a pretty boring stream, admittedly, and I've done done that before, and we'll probably start that up again. But what we're doing is focusing on a variety of writing genres, focusing on the conventions, the similarities and differences between say, for example, today I'm going to talk a lot about correspondence and the various types of correspondence, specifically professional correspondence that we find in the professional realm. Okay, so mostly emails, letters, and memos are the three ones we're focusing on. Very traditional, very old school, but we still do them, right? And there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that throughout the next 45 minutes, hour or so, right? Before I begin, I just wanted to just throw a few disclaimers out there. This stream is made primarily for students in my professional writing for business majors courses here at UWGB. They are available online on YouTube, on this YouTube channel, and are offered under a Creative Commons license, which means you can take them, do with them what you will, with as long as you give attribution. Trying to think. This stream is made possible by the support of our Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning here at UWGB. Research grant provided by them helped me pick up this microphone and a few other things. The green screen that I noticed I forgot to put up, so you can see the background of my office. It's not very exciting, but there it is. And this light, which I always also forget to turn on because it's too bright, and our Wi-Fi, for whatever reason, there's a Wi-Fi connection issue that I can't change the lighting. So I'll toy with that later. If chances are you've never seen one of these before. The gist of it is just sort of an informal overview of various types of writing meant for students in my courses as well as other writing courses here at UWGB. I usually stick to the topics that are relevant to that particular week in my class, but I'm always open for any sort of suggestions. Notice I'm trying to keep an eye on chat here, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. I'll do my best to answer them and catch them if I can. If you are a student of mine or a student of others in our classes here at UWGB, you are more than welcome to shoot me an email with a piece of writing that you would like reviewed online. I just ask that you remove any sort of identifying information, names, addresses, phone numbers, all that good stuff. I don't want to broadcast your information online. If you send it to me at my email address, you should be able to, I'll take a look and make sure that information is not contained in that writing, but otherwise, yeah, I'm more than happy to review it online and answer any questions on the fly. Like I said, this really is meant the idea was to offer a substitute for the classroom experience for online students, as well as when we were in the midst of COVID, students who missed class, so I started doing this. You will find, as most of my in-person students quickly discover, I talk quite a bit. I tend to go on various tangents, so this is not going to be a uh, tightly scripted, highly edited video. More on, have very little time as it is, but that takes even more time. Other subjects that we'll cover over the next 6 weeks in this series are going to be reports. We're going to do, hopefully, in a couple weeks, we'll do a little bit on LinkedIn. And we'll do some uh, PowerPoint presentation techniques, just whatever. And then we'll do, trying to think of the schedule, reports. I think I covered that. Infographics, brochures, a couple of different things. Might start to break this down. I know I tend to do them on Tuesdays for a couple hours, but I may go ahead and break it up into two and do another one on Thursday, but we'll see. All right. So, like I said, that's enough of my rambling. Let's see where we're at. So, correspondence. I'm trying to remember the exact number, but the little grammar plugin tool, Grammarly, some of their writers did some research. I can't remember if it was a report or not, but they said we waste to the tune of $1.2 million. Let me see if I can find it. Um, it's in my Yes, $1.2 trillion each year due to poor business communications. If you are in my class, just sort of cribbing off the reading from this week, if you are not in one of my classes and are interested in this, I can certainly put it up. This will be available to everyone free of charge within the next probably by the end of the summer. Let's just leave it at that. But so anyway, $1.2 trillion are wasted because of poor communication skills in America alone. This was from, I think, 2009, late 2000s. But still, it's a staggering number, 1.2 trillion. Even having seen that bit of information several times, it still stuns me. All right, it's because we are, simply put, extremely bad at. We have this information in our heads, and in the workplace, translating that onto digital email or a digital file or a document, it's very difficult. Okay, writing. If you're in this class. If you're out there watching this, you probably know that writing is incredibly important, especially in the professional realm, especially in the world of business. It's how we make connections. Other than personal interactions and face to face time, you really do so much using writing. If you walk out into any sort of downtown area, go out to eat, spend any time in an office, you're surrounded by writing. We're inundated by it, and we often don't even pay attention to it. Okay, I just saw a thing on Reddit this morning. The question was in the Ask Academia subreddit, why don't instructors answer their emails? And, of course, I had to check that out because not only have I had that same question when I was a student, I've also had that same question as an instructor. I've also felt that on the receiving end, having received emails and not responding to them as quickly as I would like, or outright forgetting them. It happens. Okay, so poor communication causes the whole range of issues from minor irritation to damaging not just property, but also endangering health. I've been in situations before, not thankfully not involving me, but I worked in a place at one point where because of poor communication, it caused traffic jams in the region, significant traffic jams. And that doesn't seem like a lot because we've all been involved in traffic jams. But when you're talking about graduation weekend in a small urban area connected by bridges and tunnels, and all of those, and some of those bridges are closed, well, if you have tens of thousands of people losing access to an event, watching their child, for example, graduate from college, you get a lot of ticked off citizens. So, yeah, it's important. We've all heard about this sort of joke about doctors' bad handwriting. I can't remember the number, but poor communication causes uh, a profound amount of medical issues because prescriptions are the wrong prescription is given, the wrong diagnosis, all sorts of information. Again, I don't have that data in front of me. I should probably have that pulled up or written, jotted down before I mention it, but I'm sure a quick Google search could produce something. All right. So, our goal with this sort of overview is to just go over the various components and elements of each variety or genre of writing. So, we're looking at correspondence, and there's a lot of similarities. If we're looking at primarily emails, letters, and memos. Okay, so if we just focus on the elements, there are going to be some similarities. There's also going to be similarities in in the way we speak. I often refer to it as our voice. So, what is our voice in email? What I'll also do, if the mood fits, I'll also turn to some of our AI powered writing assistants that we have available to us. I'm going to stick mostly with the Bing assistant that is offered on, let's see, Google Edge, or not Google, Microsoft Edge, their browser. It's what we use here on campus. I'm also familiar with ChatGPT and have used Google's Bard a little bit. But I'm going to stick with Microsoft strictly simply because it's what we use here on campus. Um, Admittedly, I'm not as familiar with Bing or nor Google Bard, but we'll try it out. All right, so let's go ahead and get right to it. Let's see. Okay. All right, so here we have an email. We've all seen this before. I'll embiggen this. There are different various components to email, and now at this point, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're probably a student here at UWGB. Maybe for whatever reason you came across this channel and you're interested in learning more about writing, developing your own skills or whatever. But what I do, just as another warning, I tend to do a little bit more of a deep dive, kind of trying to explain some elements, going over the different functions of the tools, and before really talking about why we do things, actually writing an email. I don't spend a whole lot of time actually writing on this stream. All right, so first of all, the components. This is Microsoft Outlook. Again, it's what we have on our Microsoft campus. So you have a number of different functions up here, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but I do want to go over some that are worth, if you're a student, it's never too early to start thinking about professionalizing your correspondence. Okay, so let me see if I can. Options. Okay, so I'm going to kind of wing this a little bit. I'm trying to go off memory, and usually what happens is I forget something or the layout has changed because of software updates. So again, I'm going into File, Options. I'm going to scoot myself over here a little bit. Options. Where'd you go? Options. And then you get a bunch of Outlook options. And these, I'm not going to go over all of these, but there are a couple of things that you're going to want to think about. Okay. Composing messages in this format, HTML, rich text, or plain text. I stick with HTML so I can add links, I can add images, anything, almost anything you can do in a web page, you can then do in an email. I shouldn't say any web page, any super basic, circa 1990s web page, right? Always check spelling before sending. You know, some of these are fairly new. The one I really like to focus on, especially in class, is the use of signatures. Now, signatures are a familiar, pretty common way of professionalizing your email, standardizing it, but also adding pieces of information like, say, your title, your workplace. And so you don't have to type that each time. Okay, so here we have my standard signature. It's all I use. I really I don't get too fancy with this, and I'll explain why in a second. My name, title, department, and campus location. Those, what I try to stress in my writing courses and for my own writing, even though I tend to write like I talk, okay, going on, and then I have to like scale it back. The reason I do this is clear, concise, consistent writing is what we look for in professional writing. All right. You try to keep things as manageable as possible. You don't want your emails to be too long. You want them to be, what I mean by effective is that clearly communicating the purpose as quickly and as straightforward as possible. You know, what I hear a lot from students in writing courses, who, obviously you've taken writing courses before, English classes, and there's this very distinct way of writing. As you expand your writing experience, you continue writing. For those of you who do not like writing, I hate to tell you, but you're going to be doing a lot of it for the rest of your life. For those of you who do enjoy writing, it's good to have that skill. It's good to keep practicing it. And as you practice it, you gain the flexibility to write in various styles. And this is, at least from my professional experience, this is what helps you make bank. Okay, writing is what is often, like it or not, it's often referred to as a soft skill. These are skills that translate into any sort of field, interpersonal communication, work ethics, time management. These are what we call soft skills. And a lot of people, and increasingly so, are getting kind of sick of this name because it implies that hard skills like engineering, computer programming. These are all what we would consider hard skills. Carpentry. I'm trying to list off a few more, but so more hands-on, more technical. Those are what we call hard skills. Soft skills are these. They tend not to be taught. They're although we do teach them, they're almost believed to be inherent, like good genes, like someone is personable, someone has charisma. These things can be ingrained, part of our genetic makeup. We could be, raised in a household of actors, and we just sort of become naturally, uh, you know, uh, capable capable of acting and performing and engaging with a wider audience. Whereas those of us who did not grow up with those sorts of backgrounds, lean towards other skills, whatever we were exposed to growing up, right? So, anyway, um, but writing is a skill. It is a technology. Writing is a technology first and foremost. It's like any technology, we have to learn how to use it. Writing, for most of us, the vast majority of us, is not one of those technologies that we spend a lot of consistent time, day after day after day, refining our work, right? Refining our craft. But it is a craft, much like carpentry, anything like engineering. There are a number of rules, there are a number of standards, there are a number of expectations. All of these go into writing. So, email signature is one of them. As a professional note, the email signature is something that we find um, in professional correspondence. It's a marker of professionalism. So, I always ask my students to, if you haven't already, set up a signature in your email. This, you'd be surprised how many instructors and other professionals find this. Um, what's the word I'm thinking of? Um, Significant, right? Not the exact word I'm thinking of, but I'll call it significant because it's impressive. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. People are generally impressed when, especially someone who they perceive as not quite at that professional level yet, act, perform, demonstrate professional skills and perspectives. So, having a signature in there is a great way of doing that. Now, mine is fairly short and simple. And again, the reason why I do this is to keep it fairly low key. Now, I see a number of signatures that have web addresses, links to LinkedIn profiles, social media profiles, quotes, all of that. Um, Different colors, different size type styles. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's good or bad. For me personally, I would not do that because it tends to clutter up the email. Okay, for me, when your signature is longer than the actual email itself, um, that's for me, what I read that as is someone who is using email to sort of promote some sort of aspect or quality of themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it's just not how I want to. I don't like for my professional persona. I like to keep it very simple and straightforward. Yes, that I have often been accused of not doing enough self promotion, and I'm okay with that. I am trying to get better about it, though. Anyway, so here's your signature. You can add it, you can change fonts just like you would any other. So I've got this Open Sans font in here. You can bold, you can change colors, all that good stuff. I'm not sure you can I'm not sure about the business card, what that means. You can probably add links. And so it's associated with my email. You notice here that it says new messages. It will reply to a new message with my standard signature, but any sort of reply or forward beyond that, I won't add the signature, which is nice because again, that's one more thing. Recent email with someone from city of Green Bay. I noticed that both of our signatures were there, but then as the conversation gets a little bit more informal and yeah, you sort of lose that initial introductory layer of professionalism that includes the signature. All right, so I would suggest if you haven't already setting up a signature for your emails. It's a nice professional touch. I'm not going to go through the rest of these options. There are many of them. That's one of the great awful things about Microsoft is there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of power in all their tools, but it's it takes quite a while to go through. All right, so you see my signature is already in there. All right. And let's say dear Professor X. So we start off with our greeting. Dear whoever, sometimes you have a comma, sometimes you have a colon. If you see over here my little I've got Grammarly going here. Sometimes, and this is one of the ways that I first noticed that Grammarly was being used in student writing, was there was often this comma placed after the dear in the opening of emails and signatures. I had never seen that before. Um, at least for me, and I don't know if this was the case, so I'm kind of assuming here that this is what was happening, but Grammarly was suggesting adding a comma after dear for the signature line. I I don't know if that's some new rule that I'm not familiar with or just Grammarly being goofy, but I keep that out of there. Colon or comma, I'm not entirely sure what the preference is from a strict standpoint. I choose a colon just because that's how I was taught how to do it. I've also seen commas, um, but either one. All right. So here when we start our email, it's pretty straightforward. You want your email to, here's the problem. And this goes back to the Reddit question that I mentioned earlier. Why don't people answer emails, especially when they're addressed to them? Well, because we get a lot of emails. We get too many emails. And one of the readings from our class, it's a kind of an older piece, so I might switch this out for next semester. But especially during COVID, we were inundated by emails. We were flooded by them. This is a long. It takes a long time to write them. It takes a lot less time to read them. But when you're bombarded by them, um, it's almost impossible to manage. I spend. Let's see, what was I doing? It's a good activity for when you're on a train, for example, on a bus. Just like deleting emails. My work email, for example, is full, so I've missed a couple while on vacation a few weeks ago. Anyway, so here we have our email, and the way we're going to start is you could start one of two ways. During COVID, we got into the habit of starting our emails and our correspondence with "I hope that this finds you well," or "I hope all is well with you and yours," and "I hope you are doing well." I think we're starting to get away from that, although I tend to leave that in there just because I think for a lot of us it's become conventional to ask, say, make some sort of open up with a light pleasantry like that. All right, but for the sake of our purposes here and moving into our professional realm, do see here some people talking about getting away from that. Even during COVID, there was a lot of debate. This is what we do in English departments. We debate whether we should open a line with that because what happens if someone is not doing well, right? So for the time for our purposes, I go back and forth for what it's worth. So anyway, um, noticed on the syllabus that there was a link was directing to a in so one of the things that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about, but I notice a lot. So I've always got Grammarly going, and I'll tell you right now, I spend more time dismissing Grammarly suggestions than actually using them. This is simply because it tends to render all of our writing into this sort of very vanilla form, right? It's very mechanical, very impersonal. We all have sort of hallmarks of our writing, wrinkles, common errors or even flourishes that make our writing ours. Okay. Again, it's just like any skill. You can tell who has often created something by certain hallmarks, certain markers, certain levels of craftsmanship. Okay, what Grammarly is doing here is offering a suggestion. I haven't even looked at it yet, but it may. It, I always scrutinize it. I don't just click. I noticed on the syllabus that a link was directing to a missing file. I noticed on the syllabus that there was a link that was directing to a missing file. So that's actually not bad. I noticed on the syllabus that a link is directing to a missing file. It says directed, uh, so there would be some sort of tense issue there. This looks like past tense, but I noticed on the syllabus that a link is directing to a missing file. Let's I'll leave it at that. Let's see. This is very similar in tone and language to an email I received last night about the Canvas site, right? I noticed on the syllabus that a link is directing to a missing file. The file is provided elsewhere, but wanted you to know. Um, the um, So very clear, very straightforward. I noticed on the syllabus that a link is directing to a missing file. This link is located in the policies section towards the bottom. The file is provided elsewhere, but wanted you to know. Thank you. Right. So there we have our closing followed by our signature, and there you have it. Very clear and straightforward. Um, this type of simple email doesn't really warrant a I hope this finds you well, so I'll leave that out. But you know, in other circumstances, depending on who I'm addressing the email to, may add it or not. Anyway, keeping this simple. Notice I have not put any sort of addressee on here. Now, the reason for that is simple. This helps prevent unintentional sending of emails to the recipient. Okay, so without that, I'm not going to accidentally hit send before the email is ready to go. I'm also not going to add a subject because uh, in this case, Outlook will prompt me saying, "Hey, are you sure you want to send this without a subject line?" Okay. So I'm going to leave those two pieces of information off until I'm sure that I'm ready to send this. So I'll add I've got my email address in there and now my subject. Subjects should be short and simple. Okay. A number of reasons for this. A, you want your subject to clearly describe what the subject matter of the email is. And also, in many cases, if you notice in your email client, you may have a notice that the subjects are often shortened or truncated or cut off. So you have like a few words and then a dot, dot, dot afterwards, or otherwise it's just this blank space. Well, so if you have a short and sweet subject line, that all of those details are going to be contained, and the recipient can easily see what the subject matter is without having to even open up the email. This is very common. This is good, sound, professional practice. So I might say missing link. Uh, okay. So I'm gonna. So that's good. Missing file link on syllabus name. I'm gonna go ahead and send it. So if let's see how long it takes. my email to come. Okay, so if I, yeah, it's got the subject line is all there, and so I've got everything's looking good. All right, so that's exactly what we're looking for in an email. Short subject line, very clear, describes the subject um, in clear terms, very direct. The purpose of the email is clear and to the point. There's a proper greeting line. There's not a whole lot of fluff in there, and the signature is also added. Okay, so those are just a few things to think about when you're writing an email. All right, now let's talk about cover letters. All right, so here we have our blank Word document. Now, um, again, trying to watch time here and thinking about cover letters. Now, if you've made it this far, if you're at the college level, you've probably written several letters. I believe they still instruct this in high school, and you've probably, if you've ever had to apply for a job, you've probably had to write a cover letter. Although cover letters are, they tend to go back, we go back and forth on whether they're valuable or not, and that's for a variety of reasons. Okay. The resume is a good document for displaying your skills, your credentials, and your you know sort of biographical information. Your cover letter is where you sort of, if the resume is a skeleton, the cover letter is where you start to flesh out those qualities and really talk. It's your chance to sort of flesh out those bullet points that you have in your resume. Now, a lot of people don't like writing cover letters. To be perfectly honest, a lot of jobs don't require cover letters. But you really want to think about, what does a cover letter do? It, more than a resume, a cover letter demonstrates who you are. This is a chance for you to spend a little bit of time talking about yourself, highlighting your qualities, talking about some of those high points in that resume that can get lost, okay, in that document. It also demonstrates your writing skills. This is where we start to run into issues with cover letters. Talking with my father, actually, not too recently, not too long ago, about thinking about AI. He's like, "Yeah, I noticed that whenever I would interview a potential employee, um, we would be so impressed with their writing, and their cover letter was outstanding and polished, and then you would meet them and we couldn't reconcile the person, the way persona in person was very different from who they were in their writing." And my father's older, he's now retired, and I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, you can pay people to write your cover letters for you. We've had tools like this for a while, this even before AI, but this is definitely going to become a challenge for hiring managers. Those of you who are in human resources, are pursuing a HR career, how you handle cover letters in application materials is going to be very different than how they did it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. How they do it now is probably going to be very different in 5 years from now. Okay. We have software that can sort through thousands of applications and look for keywords, identify the best candidates based on how they write. Another benefit of using a cover letter. So a cover letter has to be really strategic as well. It demonstrates, okay, resumes tend to be very objective in tone. And what I mean by objective is that it's not as personal. Yes, it definitely highlights various qualities, but they tend to be written in a very um, standard format. So do cover letters. Don't get me wrong. As we'll talk about in a second, cover letters usually follow a very straightforward pattern. but the language, the content of that cover letter is very subjective. And what I mean by subjective is more personal, more internal. How does that writing reflect you as a person? This is how, I know whenever you're applying for a job, it's incredibly valuable. Like you just want the job, okay? Especially if you're in a position where you're very new to the field that you're applying for. However, as you move along in your career path, or maybe this is something you're already thinking about, you also want a job that's going to be a good fit. Okay, so your cover letter, when we write cover letters using things like even Grammarly or AI, it's going to write a very generic sounding cover letter. It might address all of some high points. There are ways like, so for example, I could take the job listing and say, hey, Chat GPT, please take this job description and write a cover letter. And if you get really savvy, you can start to manipulate this so it does sound a little bit more like you. It does use your credentials. If you don't have the prompt engineering skills now, I'm certain that we're all going to have those skills going for very soon. If there aren't already tools out there that um, enable you to customize your correspondence as we would. So our cover letters are again pretty standard. There's a very standard format. So if I were to, let's say, go, and I'm going to look for an online office template because I want to show you some things here. So at some point I'm going to do one of these focusing specifically on our tools and our technology leading up to ChatGPT and other AI assisted writing tools. My argument is why this is nothing entirely new. We've been slowly preparing for this, and I certainly don't think this is the last, the final stage of our writing evolution. Okay, we've had templates, we've had tools that help us with our writing for so long. We've gotten used to things like spell checkers and templates like this. Now, if I use a template, let's see. I'm gonna go with. I'm trying to find a basic one here. Inverted modern cover letter. Um, I could spend a lot of time even just talking about these. This one, for example, if I were to open this, okay, this gives me this awful blue. I don't. That's like a screen blue. That's just disgusting. But then they've got the letterhead. No, this is the recipient's address up here. The letterhead is down here instead. So there's a little bit more creative license happening here, but it's still freaking ugly as heck. So I'm not gonna save that. And that's generally the case for templates. Okay, so when as a professional, and even now as an instructor, I see a lot of the templated cover letters, and they're very easy to. It's easy to be tempted to use one of them, and in a pinch, they can work. What is the risk, however, of using one of these templates if you were, say, applying for a job? And if I were to use, let's say, um, cover letter, I'm going to use applying for a job, and I use this bubbles thing. Okay, I'm gonna, you know, chances are if you're using a template, someone else is probably going to be using something similar as well. Now, if you're a job candidate, if you're applying for a job and there are, say, dozens of people who are, maybe even hundreds of people who are applying for this position, your goal, think about what your purpose is, not just to get a job, but to really stand out among the field. You are in a competitive environment. You have to stand out and make yourself stand above the rest of the crowd. So for these situations, I would never think about using a template cover letter. Now, of course, this is a lot of entry level gigs this may not matter. If certainly if your HR department that you're applying to is using tracking software through to sort out their resumes and applicant materials, chances are I can't say for certain, but I'm guessing that it's only looking at the language and the writing rather than the design. I would, as you get closer to your professional, close to graduation, if you're a student or moving on to another career or shifting careers or applying or whatever, I would suggest either paying someone or coming up with your own letterhead. Again, this is one of those markers of professionalism. If we had the time in the capacity in our class, I would certainly spend time having people design letterheads. But it's easy for me to say because I have a background in design. Not so easy for those who don't have that background and are also at the mercy of their tools, okay, which is often Microsoft Word, and we don't have those techniques down already. All right, but what templates can be good for is just showing you a basic layout of how a letter is supposed to operate. So, and that's basically the my address, let's see, so I might have address, state, city. Right. Notice, um, again, I'll do another section on tools at some point, but if you notice here, when I hit enter, it skips a space. You can correct this by going up to paragraph. There's this little tiny arrow here. If you go under there, and then there's this spacing before, after. Notice it's adding 8 points. I believe that's a whole nother line, so I'm going to make that 0. City, state. I might add phone, email, that email, right? That type of thing. Next. So let's say you have your letterhead, and this could be, you might have your, if you're writing on behalf of an organization, you might already have letterhead established that you have to use. So there might be like the logo here, another sort of treatment. Then that's followed by the date, and that's followed by their recipient and their address. Right, so something like that. And this is pretty standard, okay? This is the date that you're sending that letter. So again, these are professional markers. Now, the question has come up, well, if I'm sending this letter and it's going to be in an email, chances are they have that information anyway. But don't assume that they're not going to print that off and put it in a pile. There's a lot of old school managers out there, right? And you have to be aware that not everyone is using email. Not everyone is. I mean, I once applied to a job using a fax machine, and the art director said the reason why and I asked after I'd been hired why they used fax machines in their application. He says, well, if you're uh, dedicated enough to find a fax machine that can send your information, chances are we're going to want to hire you. So it's these little things. I mean, hiring managers are smart. They don't want to hire people who are not qualified or not dedicated to the position in some way. So when you're writing according to these conventions and following these formats that are tried and true, it says something about you as a professional. Is that going to work in every case? Absolutely not. Years ago, when I was thinking about getting back into freelancing, and I had been out of the design PR business for a while, let's just say social media was just starting when left that industry. So, in applying for any sort of marketing position, any sort of social media position, I was clearly not following the ideal conventions. Okay. And so I had to change my all of my materials up, do new design, new formatting, new approach, new very like an entirely new professional persona almost. Okay. Um, Fortunately, I did not respond to any inquiries, or else I wouldn't be here talking to you. All right, so next we have our greeting line, just like our email. Again, colon, comma. I'm not sure what is the strict standard, but right. And then this is your purpose stated here. So, one of the things to keep in mind, and this goes for emails as well, is that your what we've often been many of us have been told that a paragraph is 3 to 5 sentences and must follow a very particular formula. In professional writing, don't you don't never want to create a paragraph where only a statement or two is all that's necessary. So in a letter, it's very important, especially when you're just starting out, but most correspondence, that purpose has to be clearly stated right off the bat. Okay, this goes back to what I was saying before about do I hope this finds you well. I would not put that in, say, a cover letter for a job application. Okay. You haven't actually met the person, you don't know them. It might, I know when I was applying for this job that I currently have, it was during COVID times. And I bet if I looked at my cover letter, I may have said something to that effect, but maybe not. Okay. It's hard to think back three some years ago to think about where we were at in the middle of COVID and all that. But your purpose should be clearly stated up front. I am writing you, I am reaching out, I am contacting you, and you sort of go through this. You try to keep it as simple and as professional as possible. All right. My name is. Why are we watching this guy write this stuff out? Well, so I've done this several times. I've kind of got for the sake of time, I'm just keeping it very simple. My name is Chris Perzicki. Okay. Now the question comes up. Well, why would you put your name on there if your name is already up here? And this was led to a pretty good discussion in class. Now, honest to God, that was just how I learned how to do it. Talking about going back over 30 years. So I've kept doing it. But it actually had me thinking, like, why do you do that? Okay, why is that important? And it's actually a marketing student that had pointed out the had a great insight because from a marketing standpoint, you want to make sure that your brand is just always on the mind of the audience. Beautiful. That was a remarkable insight, and I'm very glad that we had that exchange. My name is Chris Perzicki, and I am submitting my materials for consideration towards the instructor position at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. It's a little bit wordy. If I wanted to take the time, I might kind of tweak that a little bit, maybe try to shave off a couple words in there because it is a little bit long. But notice what I have there: who I am, what my purpose is, and that includes I am submitting my materials for which position at which location. All of these important pieces of information are there located right there in that first sentence. Okay. That's about all the time you have, okay, to convince the reader to keep going on. If you don't have this first line or that first paragraph even polished, tight, and ready to go, and clearly communicating every single point that is of value to that reader, they're going to throw it in the circular file. Right? It's not going to be looked at again. So many, again, same with emails, so many pieces of writing that a person has to read, and we just don't have time for it anymore. So making sure that your purpose is clearly stated right off the top is very important. Now, for a job cover letter, would typically follow up with a broad overview. Right, so I might say, based on my 10 years experience of teaching first year writing at various institutions, I know I'm applying, it's again, you got to play around with it, trying to think of how to clearly, my experience I could say my experience includes over 10 years of teaching first year writing at various 2 and 4 year institutions, period. Okay. Then I might follow that up with what I'll call a nod to the, um, here I might say, okay, if I look at the mission statement or um, industry, or there's a million different ways of connecting with, let's just say, rather than, so what I mean by connection to the organization's values, if you look at if you're applying to, say, Schreiber, even UWGB or any organization, chances are there's going to be some sort, the job description at the bare minimum should be giving you a wealth of information. Ideally, that job description should have all the information you need to apply for that position with confidence. More often than not, however, I would bet that that organization also has a web page. They also have social media. There's other ways of just finding out what the values of that organization are. What's their priority other than making widgets or teaching, what's other than making widgets, or let's say serving hamburgers, whatever it is. You get a sense of what their values are, okay? If you've worked in the service industry for a while, for example, you know that you need to, teamwork is valued. Again, that's a soft skill. Teamwork, communication, flexible hours, able to lift so many pounds, making widgets, able to, if I'm making widgets, like able to stand in a single place for an extended amount of time, ability to follow directions, safety protocols. It all depends on how familiar you are with the industry. But also be thinking about, what is the mission statement? What's their purpose? What are they driven by? Um, think about how you can make that connection. How do your values, let's see, I am someone who values punctuality and uh, being getting to where I need to be a few minutes ahead of time. this is, it's a soft skill, but this is a value. I'm I'm a loyal employee. I am focused primarily on um, quality control. That's all of these things. Look at what they're asking for in your in the job description is going to speak volumes about what those values are. But you also have, again, their website and social media can tell you a little bit more about them. Using that right there in that first paragraph. So I'm not even going to write anymore here at this point, even though your cover letter should be about 1 page. You're given about a page of real estate. You should probably use all of it. 1 inch margins all around. Another reason for not using templates is because you are spending a lot of time on design elements that are taking up valuable space that you could be discussing your qualifications. Is the reader going to read all of it? I'm going to just say that for the sake of argument, probably not. That's why that first paragraph is going to be really important. Getting that purpose on there clearly and directly, but also making sure that you're making a connection to them as an organization, demonstrating that you're going to be a good fit. Okay. If you are, and this is beyond what we're really talking about in this class, but just as a general rule of thumb, if you're not qualified for the job, don't apply to it. If you don't want the job, don't apply for it. It's just one more thing, and it could end up burning a bridge. If you apply to something, you don't want the gig, and they call you in for an interview. That could be the best thing, or it could be the worst thing. You really don't want to. Uh, I know it's easy to say, not if because I'm not in a position anymore where I'm just looking for that first professional job. And if you are in that position, it's important to be thinking about what sort of job is going to support your growth and your development. Chances are you're gonna, like, for example, something I often say in for students in my class, I would not indicate your that you are a student in that first paragraph. I would put that somewhere towards the end. Um, if and think about why. If you are, there are plenty of positions out there where they're looking for new hires, recent graduates, interns, what have you. There's plenty of those out there. There are also a lot of jobs that will discard your application if they know that you're a student because of a variety of reasons, lack of professionalism, lack of experience. It can be difficult to train new hires depending on the industry, especially if your management is not patient, willing, or they don't want new graduates. There's a number of different reasons. That's not to say you're not qualified. Um, it's this ongoing joke that what employers are looking for is someone who's got mastery level of tools that have only been around for a couple years, but they want 10 years of experience using it. Right? There's a lot that can be said about that, but this is also indicating that they want certain experience levels, certain attitudes that come with experience, though you may have that. And that's why a cover letter is important, because you are saying, yes, I graduated in, say, 2023, but I've been using this tool for a couple of years. These skills that you're looking for, I have mastered in a variety of different projects that I've worked on. So a number of different things, different approaches. Anyway, it's 12:30. As typical, I did not get to memos, but I believe there's actually another video on the channel for that. So anyway, my name is Chris. This is Together We Write, a live stream writing stream that coming out of UW Green Bay, thanks to a supporting grant from the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. For next week, we will be talking about reports and analysis and just like very simple forms of analysis and starting to think about formatting and organizing information in effective ways. Until then, have a great week. If you're in the Wisconsin area, you're probably enjoying some pretty nice weather. For those of you elsewhere, I hope everything is just as nice and I hope everyone is safe and doing